A childhood marked by pain and instability almost too difficult to imagine, Sophia Loren's life has always drawn the world's gaze, like a magnet. Her journey from a frail, unwanted little girl to a woman admired by millions for her breathtaking beauty, when paired with a past soaked in tragedy, caused her fame to erupt like a storm. And even now, as she approaches 90, the shadows of those memories have never truly let her go. What truly happened in the life of this legendary woman? Stay with us. The story ahead may leave you breathless with emotion. She was not born in a palace or under a star in 1934 in the charity ward of a clinic for unwed mothers in Rome. Sophia Loren came into the world already burdened by absence and shame. Her father refused to marry her mother and vanished soon after, leaving a silence that would echo through every page of her childhood. Her mother, Ramilda Villani, a woman once compared to Greta Garbo for her beauty and talent, was left to raise Sophia alone, with no partner, no support, and no future in sight. They returned to Pozzuoli, a town so impoverished it was declared the poorest in Italy. There, life was not lived, it was endured. For months, they called a tunnel home, sleeping underground, while hunger hollowed them from the inside out. They drank filthy water from a car radiator just to survive. And when Sophia, still a baby, fell gravely ill, her mother had no milk to feed her and no money for care. A wet nurse was found, but only in exchange for meat the family did not have, so they gave up their own food to keep Sophia alive. That child, mocked by strangers as ugly, too thin, too awkward, would one day become the face of Italian cinema. But back then, she was only a ghost of a girl, clinging to a mother who traded everything, dignity, dreams, her own strength, just to keep her daughter breathing. Even the woman who nursed her would later mock her appearance to the press. What kind of world surrounds a child with such cruelty from the start? And what kind of resilience must it take to rise from that darkness and transform it into legend? Even after surviving illness, poverty, and abandonment, the world was still unkind to young Sophia. At school, the children did not see her as one of them. They saw only what made her different. Her body, still recovering from malnutrition, was thin and awkward, earning her the cruel nickname Toothpick. But the teasing went deeper than appearances. Sophia carried a label that followed her like a shadow. She was born out of wedlock and in the eyes of a judgmental world that made her less loved, less worthy, less normal. In the classroom where other children bask in the comfort of traditional families, Sophia sat alone, quiet, withdrawn, and bruised not by fists, but by whispers. Her only sanctuary was her mother, the one person who made her feel whole, even when the rest of the world tried to break her into pieces. And as if emotional pain was not enough, war soon brought physical danger to their doorstep. Pozzuoli, the poor town they called home, became a target. Bombs fell from the sky like curses, and one day a piece of burning shrapnel struck Sophia's face, leaving a scar on her chin that she would carry for life. That wound, though small, became a silent symbol of everything she had endured, of the girl who was mocked, outcast and scarred, but who never gave up. But even in a life filled with hunger, ridicule, and war, fate, just for a moment, allowed a sliver of light to shine through the cracks. Amid the thunder of falling bombs and the sting of cruel laughter, Sophia found herself in a house that suddenly pulsed with the rhythms of a world she had never known. Her grandmother, desperate to survive, had turned their modest home into a makeshift pub, a place where American and British soldiers came not to fight, but to rest. And it was there, under flickering bulbs and over clinking glasses, that young Sophia, still reeling from rejection and hardship, was offered something she had never truly tasted before. Kindness. The soldiers gave her words from a new language, English. They taught her dances that made her laugh in spite of everything, and one of them, with a soft smile, handed her a piece of chocolate, the first she had ever seen in her life. That single bite, sweet and strange, was more than just food. It was a promise that the world might hold something beautiful for her too. As the war faded into memory, Sophia's own reflection began to shift. The girl once mocked, as awkward, began to change. Her features, once the target of scorn, started to soften, bloom, evolve. Her mother, Romilda, was the first to see it. She had always known that there was more to her daughter than others could see. And now the world was finally beginning to catch up. Determined not to let that fragile bloom wither, Romilda enrolled Sophia in a local beauty pageant, a small gesture that would alter the course of history. And in 1951, at just 17 years old, Sophia Loren stepped onto a stage that would transform her life forever, because sitting in the audience that day was Carlo Ponti. The man watching her that day, Carlo Ponti, was not just any film producer. He was one of Italy's most influential cinematic figures, a visionary whose hands had already shaped the stars of Italian cinema and brought them to the world. But when his eyes met Sophia's, it was not just potential he saw, it was pain, promise, and something far deeper than fame. From that moment on, Carlo Ponti became more than a mentor. He became the man who would shape her future, her career, and eventually her heart. Falling in love should have been the beginning of peace. But for Sophia Loren, it was the beginning of yet another war. She had found something she never had, a man who believed in her, protected her, saw not just her beauty, but the scars beneath it. Carlo Ponti was more than a lover. He was her compass, her anchor, the father figure she had always longed for. But their love came with a curse, a punishment from a world that refused to let them be happy. Ponti, though separated from his wife, was still legally married, and in the eyes of the Catholic Church, there was no room for forgiveness. When he and Sophia dared to marry by proxy in Mexico, the Church declared it invalid, and worse, Italy accused Ponti of bigamy, turning their love into a public scandal. Suddenly, their private joy became a national disgrace. Sophia, still so young, found herself branded a sinner, not for anything she had done, but for daring to love the wrong man in the wrong time. Doors closed, tongues wagged, and for years the couple was forced to live in the shadows, in exile from the very country that had once claimed her as a symbol of its beauty and pride. But Sophia had already learned how to survive the cold, and this time she was not surviving for herself, but for the man who had given her a reason to dream again. Together they endured. They lived quietly, far from home, until finally, after years of pain and waiting, they were granted French citizenship. And in 1966, in the city of love itself, Sophia Loren and Carlo Ponti were legally wed, not in secret, not in shame, but in light. It was not just a wedding, it was a victory over judgment, over fear, over everything that had tried to tear them apart. But even in celebration, the scars remained, reminders that for Sophia Loren, nothing in life had ever come without a price. After surviving the injustice of prison with grace and dignity, Sophia Loren returned to her work, but life had one more emotional upheaval waiting for her. And this time, it would strike not her name, but her heart. It was a crossroads no heart should ever have to face. In 1957, on the set of The Pride and the Passion, Sophia Loren, young, radiant, still building her place in the world, met Cary Grant. He was everything she wasn't sure she deserved, elegant, kind, captivating, with a soul far deeper than his on-screen charm suggested. And almost instantly, something bloomed between them, something impossible to name and even harder to deny. They were drawn together like two stars destined to orbit, but never quite touch. Cary was tender, patient, and wise beyond his years. Sophia was engaged to Carlo Ponti, a man who had helped shape her life and career, and whose love had endured through distance, disapproval, and silence. But Cary made her laugh in a way she had never laughed. He saw her not just as an actress, but as a woman, vulnerable, powerful, and aching to be seen. And then, on their final night together, came the question that split her soul in two. "Will you marry me?" Cary asked softly, as the sun disappeared behind them. His voice was calm, but her heart was in chaos. How do you answer a question like that, when both answers will break something inside you? To say yes meant betraying Carlo, the man who had protected her, believed in her, stood by her when the world called their love impossible. But to say no meant burying a love she had never dared speak aloud. It wasn't just a proposal, it was a war between loyalty and longing. She thought of Ingrid Bergman, another European actress who had followed her heart and been crucified by the press. The scandals, the shame, the way her name was dragged through headlines. Sophia feared that fate more than she feared heartbreak. So she chose silence. She chose the life she had built, not the one she dreamed of. She chose Carlo, and it tore her apart. In later years, she would admit it. Turning down Cary Grant wasn't just painful. It left a wound she never fully healed. Because some decisions don't end with a wedding or a goodbye, they echo forever. Sophia Loren moved forward, with grace, with dignity, with her family and her fame. But somewhere in the quiet corners of her memory, Cary's question still lingers, unanswered, unforgettable, and impossibly tender. But not all heartbreak in Sophia Loren's life came from romance. Some of it was older, deeper, and far more personal. She had stood beside legends, conquered cinema, and survived storms most hearts would never bear. But the one person Sophia Loren could never reach was the very man who gave her life. Her father, Riccardo Ciccoloni, was not a ghost. He was worse. He was real and chose to be absent. In her entire life, Sophia would meet him only 3 times, each moment brief, cold, and hollow, like unfinished chapters in a story that never wanted to be told. The first time was when she was just 5 years old, a quiet, fleeting encounter that left no warmth, only questions. The second would not come until 17 years later, and the final meeting came wrapped in the silence of a hospital room with Riccardo lying on his deathbed. A pale stranger whose blood ran in her veins, but whose presence had never touched her childhood, her triumphs, her tears. What kind of father sees his daughter's face in newspapers and never picks up the phone? What kind of man watches the world celebrate the girl he left behind and stays silent? Sophia never disguised the sorrow this brought her. In interviews, she spoke plainly. "I wish he had been a different man, a better father, a better companion for my mother. But the universe offers no edits. You do not get to choose your parents. You only choose what kind of parent you become in their absence." In that deep, painful void, Sophia Loren found something stronger than regret. She found her mother's love. Romilda Villani, with no help, no partner, no money, had raised 2 daughters with fierce devotion and unwavering grace. And Sophia never forgot that. When the world asked where she found her strength, she always answered with one name: Mama. The pain of an absent father may never fully disappear, but in every film, every award, every moment of resilience, Sophia Loren was not just proving something to the world. She was proving something to herself, that she did not need a father to become unforgettable. As if the wounds we've seen weren't enough, Sophia Loren's greatest sorrow was still waiting, and when it came, it did not roar. It whispered and then stayed forever. In 2007, after more than 50 years of walking beside him through storms and sunshine, Sophia lost Carlo Ponti, her husband, her mentor, her only constant. He had been there from the very beginning. He had seen her before the world did, not as a fantasy, but as a fragile, brilliant girl who needed someone to believe in her. And so he did. But when he died, something in her cracked. The world may have kept applauding, but her applause stopped. Sophia Loren didn't scream. She didn't collapse in front of cameras. She did what she had always done. She endured, quietly, completely, with a grace that didn't make the pain smaller, only less visible. But anyone who has ever loved deeply knows, it's not the silence of mourning that's unbearable. It's the absence, the chair he once sat in, the books he once read, the questions she still reaches to ask, forgetting he's no longer there. Carlo wasn't just her husband, he was her gravity. He held her life in place. And without him, that life changed shape. Home became quieter, memory became louder. Fame meant nothing. Cameras felt cold. For Sophia, the tragedy was not just in his passing, but in all the days that came after. Days that no longer ended with his voice. Mornings that no longer began with his hand. It was not just the loss of a partner, it was the loss of a witness. The only one who knew the full story, who had seen her when she was nothing, and never stopped reminding her she was everything. And yet she continued, not in defiance, not in bitterness, but in quiet remembrance. Today, as she nears 90, she does not speak often of that pain. But if you look closely, in her eyes, in the stillness of her presence, you'll see it, that she is a woman who once had everything and lost what mattered most. They say time heals. But Sophia Loren knows some loves are not meant to be healed. They are meant to be carried gently, silently, all the way to the end. Though the spotlight has long since dimmed, Sophia Loren's legacy continues to shine brighter than ever. Not just because of what she endured, but because of what she gave the world. Throughout her career, she starred in over 90 films across decades, becoming one of the most respected and admired actresses in the world. From Two Women, the role that earned her an Academy Award and broke barriers for non-English performances, to Marriage Italian Style, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, and A Special Day, Loren brought a rare combination of fire, depth, and vulnerability to the screen. She wasn't just beautiful. She was undeniable. She could make you laugh, cry, ache, and dream, sometimes in a single scene. More than just a star, she became a symbol of resilience, of femininity, with strength, of dignity, in fame. At a time when actresses were often boxed in by appearance, Sophia demanded space to be complex, to be powerful, to be real. She paved the way for generations of actresses to come, not by being loud, but by being unforgettable. Off-screen, she lived with the same grace. She avoided scandals, gave back generously, and spoke often about the importance of family, integrity, and self-respect. She inspired millions of women, not only to admire her, but to believe in themselves. Now, in her later years, she lives quietly in Switzerland, surrounded by memories, her sons, and a life she built not on luck, but on fierce courage. She may no longer take center stage, but her presence still lingers in every actress who dares to be bold, in every film that values truth over glamour, and in every viewer who remembers what it means to feel deeply. Sophia Loren is not just a name. She is a force, a legacy, a lesson in how to be both luminous and human. After everything she has endured, the hunger, the war, the heartbreak, the judgment, the grief, this is where Sophia Loren finds herself now, surrounded not by applause, but by silence. Her world is no longer filled with cameras or curtain calls, but with echoes of love lost, of voices gone, of time that refuses to turn back. She does not speak of sadness, but you can feel it in the quiet she keeps, in the way she looks at old photographs, in the weight she carries behind every step. This is not the sadness of a fading star. It is the sorrow of someone who has given everything and now carries the cost alone. No matter how admired she once was, no spotlight can protect the heart from loneliness. And maybe that is what makes her story so powerful and so devastating. If you feel what she feels, if her journey stirred something in your soul, then do not leave in silence. Leave a message, a thought, a thank you, a prayer. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply to say, I see you, I remember, and I still care. You